Good morning, everybody. What a wonderful, warm introduction. In fact, it rather reminds me of the introduction that Angela Merkel got in Downing Street yesterday. At least that was the welcome she got when she arrived. It was a little different when she left, wasn't it? Did you see Dave's face? Because I think actually what Angela Merkel exposed yesterday was that renegotiation, fundamental renegotiation of Britain's relationship with the European Union is something that has been put out by David Cameron to kick the issue into the long grass beyond the next general election. It is not obtainable. It is not achievable. Renegotiation is a con. No question about that. Now, the last time we were here in this hall was for our annual conference in September 2010. And just perhaps remind ourselves where we were as a party in September 2010. We were without a leader. We were bumping along at 2.5% in the opinion polls. The fact we'd done well the year before in a European election made no difference. We were making no real impact in domestic politics, in local elections, or indeed in by-elections. I think, were demoralised by only getting 3% in the general election, and I faced personally quite a big decision. I'd led the party up until 2009. I'd gone away to pursue other political ideas and hobbies, and I very nearly got myself killed. And I have to say, in the September of 2010, I genuinely didn't know whether I was fit enough and strong enough to come back and do this job again. And I have, of course, since then, had to have quite a big operation. But being here today, in the spring of 2014, I have to say, I'm really pleased that I made the right decision back in 2010. What a privilege it's been. What a privilege it's been. Because just look at the progress we've made. We've doubled our membership. We're nearing 35,000 members. Our opinion poll ratings aren't 2.5%. They vary between 12 and 18%. And we've come second in the last 6 parliamentary by-elections. And last year, in the English County Council elections, we got 1/4 of the vote across the country. This party is on the march. Indeed, I think and believe that we are posing the biggest threat to the political establishment that has been seen in modern times. And it's because of that that we're met with such a degree of derision. We're told that the UKIP vote is just a protest vote. Well, that's not, the morning after the Eastleigh by-election, when I walked down that street with Diane James, people came up to me and said, Nigel, we're not protest voters. We believe in everything UKIP stands for. And the opinion poll shows 61% of UKIP voters vote for us because they believe in our policies, not just on the European question, but on the broader range of domestic issues as well. And the other attempt that is being made to downplay UKIP, and this is very much a Westminster bubble mindset, is to say that UKIP is just a splinter group of the Tory party. And that I can see the Tory party is very popular in this room. UKIP is somehow just a splinter of the Tory party. In fact, the impression is given that every single UKIP voter is a retired half-colonel living on the edge of Salisbury Plain. I bet there's 1 or 2 half-colonels in the room this morning. There always are. When the truth of it is that our growth in support since 2010 has come from across the political spectrum. You know, you've seen John Bickley on this platform this morning, our candidate in the recent Wythenshawe by-election. You know, John comes from a Labour background. 2/3 of our voters did not vote Conservative at the last general election. And 1/5 of our voters are people who would be described as non-voters. People who haven't voted for 20 years, in some cases, people who've never voted in their lives. And they're going out and voting UKIP. And I think we should be very proud of the fact that we are re-engaging people back in British democracy. I really do. And of course, any comment that is ever so slightly eccentric made by any one of our volunteer party is very quickly turned into a national news scandal. I mean, there was the issue of the councillor from Oxfordshire. Now, when he was a Conservative councillor and saying the same thing, it wasn't a news story. But he defects to UKIP and suddenly it is a major national scandal. Although, it is raining outside. I promised everybody I wouldn't say that, but there we are. OK, we've had one or two bad people, we've got rid of them. But quite honestly, when you look at the people in UKIP, we come from a very broad range of backgrounds, from the left, from the centre, from the right. Most people in UKIP who stand as candidates or who are branch officers have never been involved in politics before. You know, people will make the odd mistake. We're not politically cracked, and I would rather lead a party where perhaps the odd person said something that doesn't conform to the current PC climate in this country. I'd rather lead a party like that than be a member of a party run by a political class who don't actually dare say what they think, who are not in politics out of conviction, and who have betrayed this country and the people of this country and sold us out to Brussels and elsewhere. They've given away our borders. They've given away the supremacy of our law. They've given away the supremacy of our courts. They have, despite their promises at every single general election, done everything they can to make sure that we don't get a referendum so that we can determine our own future. And who is speaking up? Who is speaking up for ordinary working people in this country? Well, certainly not the Liberal Democrats. No, more on them in a moment, I promise you. And certainly not the Conservative Party, but you would have thought, wouldn't you? You would have thought that the Labour Party and the big trade union bosses in this country would be the people that would stand up to defend the rights of ordinary working class people in this country. But I'm afraid they have been so taken in by the Brussels dream, by the idea of creating a United States of Europe, that they have allowed, over the course of the last 10 to 15 years, uncontrolled, open-door, mass immigration, which has hurt the people lowest down the salary scale in this country, and only UKIP will stand up and defend ordinary men and women in Britain. So we've got 84 days to go until May the 22nd. I know this because I tick off the days every morning. We've got 84 days to go with these European elections, and I want us to be the patriotic fight back. I want us to be the people who say we are proud of our country, we wish to govern ourselves. I want us to say to the electorate, don't get mad, get even. Go out and vote UKIP on May the 22nd. I genuinely believe that if we get this right, if we get this campaign right, then on May the 22nd, we can cause the biggest political shock that has been seen in modern British political history. We can cause an earthquake on May the 22nd by winning the European elections. But there's another set of elections taking place on that day that at the moment are unnoticed and uncommented on. There are thousands of local council seats that will be contested on the same day as the European elections. And I'm pleased this morning to tell you that already UKIP have 2,500 candidates standing for us on May the 22nd. This will be our biggest electoral effort ever. So my thanks go to all our candidates, to all our branch officers. My thanks go to our voluntary party. My thanks go to our membership. And it's worth reminding people that while the odd councillor may have made comments that have attracted negative publicity, actually UKIP is doing very well in local government. Our county councillors, the 150 of them that were elected last year, have the highest attendance records in the county halls up and down the country. And in two counties, we have actually managed, because of the UKIP presence, to break the cabinet system of government and UKIP. And we should be, that's good. UKIP in local government is beginning to undo some of the damage done by the Blair years, and it's a process we must continue. Let's get hundreds of councillors elected on May the 22nd, on the same day as the European elections. And something else has changed since 2010, since we were last here for a conference. UKIP itself has changed in terms not just of its support amongst the electorate, but in terms of the people within UKIP. There's a much more diverse range of people from all sorts of different backgrounds who are taking part and standing as candidates for UKIP. And the other thing that's really changed is one of the criticisms of UKIP, and it was a fair one, was that it was all men running it. Well, that's changed hugely since 2010. We have a party director who's female. And if you look at the European election lists, whilst it's true that fewer women than men put their names forward, just look at how those women have done in an open ballot of the membership. We have women candidates at number 1 and number 2 on the list, up and down the country. And here's the key point. We've achieved that in UKIP without using positive discrimination. We've achieved it in UKIP without using all-female shortlists. We've achieved it in UKIP on merit, and that is the model we want for this country. In fact, there are some mutterings now that perhaps there's going to be a female takeover of UKIP. And I would say this. I think it's more likely that the next leader of UKIP is a woman than any of the other political parties. So I think we put to bed that myth that it's just a party of men. Now, the campaign itself, over the next 84 days, what kind of campaign will it be? Well, thanks to Nick Clegg, I think really rather interesting. And I'm looking forward to going head-to-head with Clegg on these debates. It's a great shame that Mr. Cameron and Mr. Miliband have refused to join us, but nonetheless, you know, those of us that have been in UKIP for 20 years have waited all this time to have a proper full national debate about European Union membership, and it's going to happen. And this will be the first ever European election campaign in which EU-related issues will dominate the agenda, and that, I think, is all to the good. I also, whilst I'm at it, must thank somebody else. My personal pin-up girl for the year. There's no question in my mind as to who it is. She comes from Luxembourg, and she is European Commission Vice President Viviane Reding. She was in, no, don't boo her, she's marvellous. Look, she's a godsend, sir. What are you talking about? I mean, she was in London the other day, and she was saying that 70% of our laws are made by the European Union. Yes, we agree, Commissioner Reding. We agree. She also said she thought we were too stupid to have a referendum in this country to decide whether we should stay in the European Union. So I want to make this offer now to Viviane Reding. I'm personally prepared to pay for you to speak in every major British city between now and May the 22nd. It would be an enormous help. Now, what you're going to see over the next 84 days, you're going to see the establishment coming together. You will see one or two of the big banks. You will see one or two of the giant multinationals. You will see all three political parties and many of their friends in the print media. And the establishment line will be trotted out. And it is, of course, that if we weren't part of the European Union, if we weren't governed by the great Herman Van Rompuy and his friends in Brussels, we wouldn't be able to do any business, and 3 million British people would lose their jobs. That's the line they're going to trot out. And of course, it says a lot, actually, about a political class who've never had a job in their lives and have never worked in the real world. They think that politicians create business. It's not politicians that create business. Business is created because goods and services are produced and consumers choose to buy them. That's how business is created. And you may have noticed that the United Kingdom is now the #1 export destination for Germany in the world. There is no prospect of a trade war with Germany. Mercedes, Audi and Volkswagen would not allow the German Chancellor to enter into such a trade war because we buy more from them than they do from us. And anybody that lives in the real world knows it's the customer that's king and we are the buyers. It's as simple as that. And we'll be told that we need to be in the European Union for greater global influence. This is the rubbish that's been trotted out, starting with Roy Jenkins and going on with the Foreign Office for the last 40 years. Greater global influence. Well, how is an unelected Brussels bureaucrat increasingly speaking for us on foreign policy, with William Hague, it would appear, on holiday most of the time? How is that greater global influence for this country? It isn't. It's a diminution. And what about trade? What about trade? When the World Trade Organization meet to discuss global trade rules, the British delegates have to leave the room because we're members of a customs union in which we are now forbidden from making our own trade relationships with any other part of the world. Europe is actually declining as a percentage of global trade with every single year. It's the rest of the world that's growing, isn't it? It's Singapore, it's India, it's Brazil, it's China. And we would have much greater global influence if we were able to negotiate our own trade deals ourselves. And this idea that we're not big enough, Iceland, 320,000 people, Iceland last year signed a trade deal with China. If Iceland can do it, then we with 64 million people most certainly can do it. But that is not the issue that will dominate these European elections. The issue that will dominate the European elections is the #1 issue in British politics, and that is that the vast majority of us, nearly 80% of us in this country, believe that open-door immigration is irresponsible, against the interests of the people of this country, and that it must stop. That is the issue that will dominate the European elections. We have seen, since 2004, a doubling of youth unemployment. We've seen since that time wage compression. People doing jobs now taking home less money than they were 10 years ago. And all of this has happened because we now have a totally distorted labour market in Britain because of the massive oversupply that has come to us from Eastern Europe. It's ordinary folk, it's ordinary families that are paying the financial price for this. But what about the social price of this? The fact that in scores of our cities and market towns, this country, in a short space of time, has frankly become unrecognisable. Whether it's the impact on local schools and hospitals, whether it's the fact that in many parts of England you don't hear English spoken anymore, this is not the kind of community we want to leave to our children and grandchildren. 80% of people were opposed to opening the door fully on the 1st of January this year to Romania and Bulgaria. And yet the three so-called main parties did not lift a finger to stop that from happening. Did you see the figures yesterday on immigration, by the way? Anybody notice that? An increase in net migration last year of 40% and nearly 100% of it coming from European Union countries. You know, it isn't directly Romania and Bulgaria that I'm necessarily concerned about. What I'm really concerned about is the fact that in the Eurozone, in the Mediterranean, there is no sign or prospect of any significant recovery at all. In fact, it is most likely that the majority of Romanians that come to Britain don't come from Romania. They will come from Italy and Spain, where there are already 1 million Romanian migrant workers. If the Eurozone goes as badly over the next few years as I still believe that it will, we face the prospect of the largest migratory wave that has ever come to this country, and we have three political parties who are not prepared to do anything about it. And so, these European elections are about EU membership, they're about open borders. They're about the fact that you cannot have your own immigration policy and remain a member of the European Union. And what we've got to say to the British people is this: if you support open door immigration, if you want to continue with this process, that's fine. Vote Labour, vote Conservative, vote Liberal Democrat. But if you believe that we should govern our borders, if you believe that we should control immigration, if you believe we should have a sensible immigration policy, where we have not just quantity control, but we have quality control as well, if you believe we should model our immigration system along the lines of a country like Australia, then vote UKIP on May the 22nd. And there's something else I want us to do in this campaign. We as a party have claimed back the idea that debating the European issue is not some disreputable, appalling thing to do. We have made the European debate respectable in this country. We have made the immigration debate. Remember 10 years ago? You couldn't talk about immigration. Somehow if you did, it meant you were a terribly awful, bad person. But we in UKIP have taken that issue head on, and I think proved the point that it is not extremist to talk about immigration, it is the responsible and right thing to do to talk about immigration. But what I want us to do in this campaign is I want us to make it once again respectable, to make it once again something that is not sneered at, for us to be able to stand up and say, we are patriotic and we are proud of who we are as a nation and who we are as a people. Let's make patriotism a respectable political idea in Britain again. Our ruling classes have lost confidence in this country, and that's why they've sold us out, and it's cost us money, it's cost us influence, and it's cost us self-respect. And they also appear to be wholly unfit to even manage anything in this country either, because they've handed down most of the responsibility of government to quangos, generally run by failed former politicians. As we're in the West Country, you might have guessed, I'm talking about the Environment Agency. It is astonishing to me that the Environment Agency's priorities for now nearly 10 years have been to maintain the EU Habitats Directive, to put the interests of wading birds, molluscs, beetles and water voles above the interests of farmers and householders on the Somerset levels. They've even effectively been stopped from dredging, because that is now classed as industrial waste and costs a lot of money. Well, I think there needs to be an immediate public inquiry into the way in which the Environment Agency have operated, why they have not put the interests of householders and farmers first. And I must say, going and visiting not just Somerset, but the Thames Valley as well, makes me believe that this is a strange, unnatural disaster that has happened in this country. We all know that the insurance companies will not fully compensate everybody, and so I reiterate today my call for us to take just a tiny percentage of the foreign aid budget to compensate people in this country who've suffered in these floods. Surely this is the time when the principle of charity begins at home needs to be put into action. But I'm going to talk a lot more, we're all going to talk a lot more about domestic policies post the May 22nd election. Let's keep our national campaign focused on the European question and the consequences of it. After May the 22nd, we will talk about domestic policies, and we will produce a manifesto that this time doesn't resemble war and peace, okay? You have my absolute promise that we will do that, and we will get that right. But for the next 84 days, let's say to ourselves that this is the moment that we've waited for. This is it. This is the big one for UKIP. Together, we can achieve something remarkable in these European elections. We can top those polls. And if we top those polls, it will then give us the momentum to drive us forward to the general election a year after that. We will have to put in place some pretty ruthless targeting strategies, but it is not inconceivable that a good number of UKIP people can be elected to the House of Commons in 2015. But it will only happen. It will only happen if we effectively clear this hurdle on May the 22nd. Do you know, we carry now on our shoulders the hopes and prayers of millions of people in this country. They want us to succeed, and we must do our absolute best to say to them, help us to help you. Together, we can get our country back. Together, we can put back the pride and self-respect that we ourselves feel in our nation and in our people. And I think we've got the message right. Love Britain, vote UKIP. Thank you very much indeed.